Hi, my name is Shubham Patel, and today I'll be discussing the case Foakes vs. Beer 1884. A key decision in the law of contract, specifically the doctrine of consideration. This case involves financial dispute between Dr. John Foakes, the appellant, and Mrs. Julie Beer, the respondent. Dr. Fox owed Miss Beer over $2,000 following a court judgment because he couldn't pay the full amount at once. They entered into a written agreement. Under the agreement, Miss Beer promised not to take any further legal action. If Dr. Fox paid an initial $500 and paid the remaining balance in installment until the full debt was cleared, notably, no mention was made of interest. Even though under the law, a judgment debt typically attracts statutory interest. Dr. Fox followed the agreement and paid all the installment. After the debt was paid off, Miss Beer sued him for interest on the judgment debt, which she was legally entitled to claim. Dr. Fox argued that the written agreement was binding and that she had waived the right to interest. Miss Beard argued that the promise not to claim interest was not supported by a valid consideration, so it was not legally enforceable. The key question for the court was whether the part payment of debt could discharge whole debt when there was no new consideration for the creditor's promise. The legal principle in Fox vs. Beer concerned the doctrine of consideration, which a core requirement for valid enforceable contract. Consideration refers something of value exchanged between parties under this doctrine. A party promises to do something must receive something in return. The court reaffirmed the principle that part payment of debt is not sufficient consideration to extinguish the whole debt. This rule comes from earlier English case Penal Case 1602, which stated the payment of a lesser sum on the day satisfaction, a greater sum cannot be satisfaction for the whole. In Fox vs. Beer, Dr. Fox did nothing beyond the existing legal obligation. He repaid the debt. There was no additional benefit provided to Miss Beer, such as early payment by a third party or anything beyond what was owed. As a result, the court ruled Miss Beer promised not to pursue interest lacked fresh consideration, and therefore there was an enforcement. Importantly, this decision shows that even a written promise is not enough without consideration. The agreement lacked mutual exchange beyond the pre-existing duty. This case also highlights strict separation between common law and equity. At the time, the court declined to adopt a more equitable approach, such as excusing Miss Beer's claim for interest based on fairness or reliance. However, Miss Fox was Beer estoppel was not available, and the court applied a narrow doctrine approach to contract law. Decision continues to stand for the principle that part payment is not enough unless the debtor provides something more. This makes Fox vs. Beer a landmark case in understanding how courts interpret contract modification, especially those made without a new contract. Even today, this principle applies in Australia. Courts still refers to Fox vs. Beer when considering whether a creditor can sue for the balance after accepting part payment. Although the court was legally correct based on precedent, I disagree with the outcome of Fox vs. Beer, especially from the modern commercial perspective. Dr. Fox had relied on the written agreement and paid the entire principal debt in good faith. Miss B accepted his installment and did not raise concern about interest until after the full payment. To pursue statutory interest seems unfair against commercial common sense. One of the key criticisms of this decision is that it undermines trust in negotiated agreements. In business, written terms often taken to face value, and enforcing strict technical rules like consideration can help in justice, especially when both parties clearly intend to settle the matter. The law should encourage the finality of settlement. In this case, Fox fulfilled all obligation under the agreement. Allowing Beer to go and demand more purely on technical grounds defeats the purpose of reaching a settlement in the first place. Today, courts can use promissory estoppel to prevent kind of injustice. As seen in high trees when court held that a promise, if relied upon, could prevent a party from later enforcing their strict legal rights. However, the promissory estoppel was not available when Fox vs. Beer was decided, so the court applied a purely doctrinal approach. But modern commands such as rigidity is less acceptable. Flexibility and good faith dealing are now considered equally important to protect both legal and ethical expectations in contracts. In conclusion, while the decision aligns with the doctrine of consideration, it highlights the limitation of strict legal formalism and the need for equitable principles in contract law. Therefore, at the time of Fox vs. Beer, the court made the right decision based on their approaches and the case. However, I disagree with the outcome, but especially from a modern commercial perspective. Thank you.